How we doing, everybody? So Jim Bowden's back at it again. He put out an article on The Athletic the other day titled MLB Execs Predict Alcantara, Naylor, and other players most likely to be traded at the deadline. He puts a list of starting pitchers, relievers, and position players. I'm going to go through each one. Let's get to it. So he starts off with Sandy Alcantara. He says here that he was the player mentioned the most overall by far, but he doesn't think the Marlins would get the best value for him because he has been struggling this year, and maybe they would wait to move him until this offseason. However, he does go on to say that several execs pointed to the fact that he pitched better in June and seems to be healthy and getting closer to top form. He also adds in here that another GM put it as Max Fried and Corbin Burns each got more than $200 million in free agency, but with Sandy, he's on a very team-friendly deal, and you would have him for 3 postseasons. So that's where I am leaning to the fact that he is going to get moved. Despite the struggles, you still have him for a lot of time, and he does have a very good track record. Now, this year, he is struggling since coming back from Tommy John, ERA to 6.98, FIP at a 4.69. Now, when it comes to the metrics, the velo is looking very good, 97 miles an hour on average. He's still getting a good amount of ground balls, but he's got to work on the command. The strikeouts are down. He's giving up a lot of hard hit balls. Maybe he can go somewhere else, a change of scenery, get some different voices in his head, and maybe he can get back to doing what he was doing prior to getting Tommy John. Now, I think there's some very good fits out there for him. The Cubs, they got some good pitching development over there, and they could use some more upside at the top of the rotation after losing Justin Steele. The Dodgers, they have a good track record of getting guys on track and getting more out of guys there. They've been having a lot of injuries with their rotation this year. Now, Sandy, sure, he did get Tommy John, like I said, but he does look healthy now, so maybe the Dodgers. Now, you also got the Tigers here. I think the Tigers could be great. Chris Fetter, one of the best pitching coaches in the game. I think that would be a nasty 1-2-3 of Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, and Sandy. They lost Jackson Jobe to Tommy John, so maybe this could be a chance for them. I think the Astros could be a bit of a dark horse. Framber Valdez is a free agent soon, but maybe they could make a move for Sandy, who they would have under control for the next couple of years. The Astros always want to stay in contention. And maybe the Padres, right? Michael King, he's having some issues with the shoulder right now. And with Michael King and Dylan Cease, they are going to be free agents soon. So with Sandy, you could have him under control for the next couple of years at a pretty friendly rate. I do think Sandy is going to end up getting moved, and I think teams would rather just try to get him now instead of waiting until the offseason. Up next, he talks about Mitch Keller, and he says here a lot of teams have called Pittsburgh to inquire about Keller and says the Cubs and the Mets are among the possible landing spots. Now, I've talked about Mitch Keller in prior videos, talking about how I definitely think he's a trade candidate. I think he's one of the more underrated trade candidates out there. He's having a very good year. ERA to 3.64, FIP at a 3.24 on a very team-friendly 5-year, $77 million deal. But with the Pirates, they have a lot of pitching already. Obviously, Paul Skeens. You got a couple of younger guys here like Mike Burrows, Bailey Falter. You got Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington down in the minor leagues. But with Keller, sure, he is having a good year. He's keeping the walks low. He's not giving up a lot of barrels, getting a good amount of ground balls. But when you take a look at the average exit velo, it's only in the 23rd percentile. He doesn't get guys to chase a lot. He's going to pitch more to contact. I think he's going to be a better fit with a team in a pitcher-friendly park. So going through a couple of teams here, I've already mentioned the Cubs. He was in the article as well. And then with the Mets, they've had a lot of injuries, right? Kadai Senga, Tyler McGill, they're on the shelf right now. Sean Manaea still hasn't come back this year. But with Keller, he's been very durable. And with Citi Field being a pitcher-friendly park, I could see that being a good fit. I've already mentioned the Padres here. You got guys like Cease and King going to be free agents soon. So Mitch Keller, I definitely think would be a nice fit. I'll even throw in the Guardians, right? Luis Ortiz, who knows when he's going to be coming back, if he's going to be coming back at all, right? You got a pitcher-friendly park here. And with the Guardians, they're in contention every single year. A pretty team-friendly deal. I think maybe they could take on that contract. And then I'll mention the Tigers one more time. Comerica Park is a pitcher-friendly park. I think Keller would be an awesome number 3 in this rotation. Skubal, Flaherty, and Keller in the postseason, I think that would be great. I could also see a team like the Blue Jays. Now, Rogers Center isn't really a pitcher-friendly park, but it's not a hitter-friendly park either. It's right in the middle when it comes to park factor. But with the Blue Jays, they have one of the best infields defensively this year, and with Keller, he gets a lot of ground balls, so I could see that being a good fit too. Moving on to Merrill Kelly, and he says here he's an impending free agent who grew up in Arizona and would prefer to finish his career as a Diamondback. However, as one GM told me, the D-backs can trade him at the deadline as a rental and then re-sign him in the offseason. Well, yeah, he is getting towards the end of his career. He could definitely do that if he gets traded, but that's going to be the big question. Will the Diamondbacks trade him? They're 43 and 42 as of right now, 2.5 back in the wild card as we're recording this, so they're not out of it by any means, but with the Diamondbacks, they've taken a lot of hits this year. They lost Corbin Burns due to Tommy John. What are the Diamondbacks going to do here? I think there's definitely an argument for them to just trade off as many guys as they can, like Merrill Kelly. You got Josh Naylor, Eugenio Suarez going to be free agents soon, and Merrill Kelly, who is having a good year. ERA at a 3.55, FIP right around the same. He's definitely a veteran guy that can help out a lot of contending teams out there. Now, with Merrill Kelly, he also gets a lot of ground balls, just like Mitch Keller, but the difference is he gets a lot more swing and miss, has more strikeouts per 9, so I think that opens up the possibility to go to a team that's not exactly at a pitcher-friendly park, but I still think he should go to one that has a good infield defense. Now, the Red Sox, they really need a number 2 in the rotation. I would prefer them to go after a cost-controlled number 2, someone like Freddie Peralta, if he were available, maybe even Joe Ryan, if the Twins made him available, but if they were to go to the rental route, I think Kelly could be a good fit, with Bregman coming back soon to play third base, Marcelo Meyer going to be going over to second base, so their infield is going to be a lot better. I've mentioned the Cubs already here. Their infield's pretty solid. They could do something else at the top of the rotation. I'll go back to the Astros here. If they really wanted to make a push, he would be a very good number 3 behind Valdez and Hunter Brown. Or you got a team like the St. Louis Cardinals. They are going through a bit of a transition with their front office right now. They do have one eye on the present and one on the future, but if they were to make a push for this year, maybe they could go after Merrill Kelly. Their infield is phenomenal. They got some great defense there. Now, in the end, it's going to come down to what the Diamondbacks are going to want to do, but like I said, they've had a lot of injuries. They're hanging around 500 right now, so it might be best for them to sell off some guys while they can. Up next, he talks about Andrew Heaney. He says here he's a back of the rotation inning eater who could especially help a contending team that's been dealing with rotation injuries, such as the Mets. Now, Heaney has been okay this year for the Pirates. There's no reason for the Pirates to hang on to him. 17 starts, 93 innings. That's valuable in itself for teams that are just looking for innings in the second half. ERA is okay at a 4.16, but the FIP is higher. The reason the FIP is higher is because he's giving up a decent amount of home runs, 1.3 per 9, and not a lot of strikeouts. With Heaney, he does give up a decent amount of fly balls. The average this year is 55.7%. For Heaney, he's at 61.4%. He does give up a lot of hard contact. He's only in the 30th percentile when it comes to exit velo. I think a pitcher-friendly park is going to be the best fit for him. Now, he mentions the Mets. Absolutely, with all the injuries they've been having. I mentioned earlier with Luis Ortiz. Who knows what's going to happen with him after the whole gambling thing. And then I'll go back to the Padres as well. Petco Park, pitcher-friendly park. Up next, he talks about Zach Eflin, and the big thing he says here is that he's back on the injured list with back discomfort, and that could be a red flag at the trade deadline. Now, it's been a very up and down year for Eflin this year, on the IL a couple of times, and when he's been healthy, not very good results. ERA at a 5.95, FIP at a 5.72. It would be a bummer, in my opinion, if the Orioles can't trade him. I think they need to trade off as many guys as they can to bring back some value to help them for next season. With Eflin, the one thing that he has going for him is a good track record. He pitched very well last year. Remember, he got traded at last year's deadline. The one thing he's always been consistent with is throwing a lot of strikes and having good command. Only 1.6 walks per 9 this year. So some teams that could use pitching and better command within their rotation. We got the Angels. I wonder if they could make a play. They're right there in the wild card hunt right now. And hey, another starting pitcher I don't think would hurt. And they basically just have to pretty much just take Eflin, maybe give like a lower level prospect. I'll look at the Mets here. They've had a lot of injuries. Would they want to get a guy who's been on the IL a couple of times, but they could use some better command in the rotation. Again, I'll go back to the Guardians, losing Luis Ortiz, but they've had a pretty high walk rate among their starting pitchers this year. I'll go back to the Padres one more time again. And the Dodgers, again, same thing. They've had a lot of injuries as well. Would they want to take on Eflin? But like I said earlier, they have a good history of getting pitchers back on track. At number 6, he is Zach Gallen, and the big thing he says here is maybe he'd benefit from a change of scenery. A trade could help him finish the season strong and boost his free agent value. Now, Zach Gallen has not had a good year this year, and that's terrible timing because he is going to be a free agent soon. ERA at a 5.45, FIP at a 4.97. However, he did have a pretty good start his last time out against the Giants. He struck out 10 batters. Overall, the strikeouts are down this year. He's giving up way more hard hit balls, so maybe a change of scenery could be the best thing for him, especially if the Diamondbacks continue to fall further back in the wild card. Now I think the Tigers would be a pretty good fit with Chris Fetter. He's one of the best pitching coaches in the game. I feel like they could use one more guy. The Yankees, they got Matt Blake. I feel like they could use another guy here behind Rodon and Fried. And the Astros, they did very well with Yusei Kikuchi last year. He wasn't bad while he was with the Blue Jays, but they made him even better in the second half. Either way, though, I'm 50-50. Same thing with Merrill Kelly. Let's see what ends up happening with the Diamondbacks and where they're at in the standings. And last but not least, for the starting pitchers, he is Edward Cabrera. Now, the big thing he says here is the Marlins are not looking to move him, but if they can win a trade, they'd have to consider it. Now, in my opinion, I think the Marlins should move Cabrera. Who knows when they're going to be back in contention again, another 2-3 years. Who knows? And they're looking to move Sandy Alcantara as well, either at this year's trade deadline or in the offseason. So to me, I say you take advantage of Cabrera's value while it's high. This is the healthiest he's looked in his entire career up to this point, and he's having a solid year. He's not giving up as many hard hit balls as he has in his career. He's getting more guys to chase. The velo's looking good. His breaking stuff is looking good. You got some other young pitchers within the Marlins organization right now. Uri Perez, he's coming back. Robbie Snelling is looking good down in the minor leagues. Thomas White. So I think personally they're good to go for the future. And don't forget, you still got someone like Noble Meyer. As of right now, it's a median value right around $20 million. That's really good. You can get yourself a pretty solid package of players back for that. Now, I already mentioned the Cubs for Sandy, and I think they could be a pretty good fit for Cabrera as well. But in my opinion, with how good the Cubs are looking this year, I think they need to go for more of a sure thing at the top of the rotation. Cabrera is having a good year, but I'd rather go for someone that has a better track record. Now, the Yankees, I've already mentioned them a few times here. And then when Garrett Cole comes back, that's pretty nasty over the next few years. Now, the Cardinals, I think, could be an interesting fit. Now, with the Cardinals, they're going through some turnover with the front office, with the organization. They got guys hitting free agency. Maybe go after a cost control guy here that can be with you for the next few years. Buy now and, buy for the future. Or maybe even a team like the Orioles for Edward Cabrera. They're out of it this year, but they're looking to compete over the next several years here. He could definitely be a good long-term option for this rotation. But either way, I think the Marlins, again, I think they need to cash in on his value while they still can. So it's that time of year again. It's officially trade season. You got all the rumors, all the trade proposals that I'm going to come up with that people are going to hate and yell about me in the comments about. But let's be real. It's going to be a very busy month here in July, which is why I'm very happy to be partnered with Factor. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals straight to your door. All you have to do is heat, eat, and get on your day. No prep, no cleanup, no stress. Now, when a Factor box shows up at my door, I just put them right in the fridge, and I get to rest easy that week, knowing how busy I'm going to be, along with still trying to get to the gym and still trying to enjoy at least some of my summer. Whether you're cutting, bulking, or just trying to eat clean, Factor's got options for keto, calorie smart, high protein, you name it. Now, for me lately, I've been going with calorie smart meals. It's summertime. I'm trying not to get too fluffy over here, but I've been getting some great meals, including green chili, queso, and chicken thighs, chicken and mushroom cauli rice risotto, and cavatappi and meatballs. They are absolutely wonderful. So if you're looking to unload your busy schedule, even just a little bit, head to factor75.com or click the link in the description down below and use the code 50HIDE to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. Trust me, your schedule and your stomach will thank you. Moving on to the relievers, and at number 1, he has Aroldis Chapman. He says here, the execs overwhelmingly picked Chapman as the reliever most likely to be traded in July. Now, you might be wondering, why would the Red Sox want to trade Aroldis Chapman? They're trying to make it to the postseason. He's been phenomenal at the back end of the bullpen, 38 games, ERA at a 1.29, FIP at a 1.77, still striking out a lot of batters. With the Red Sox, they did just bring in Jordan Hicks back in the Raffy trade, and, this is an electric arm that could be at the back end of your bullpen as well. They got some other guys like Garrett Whitlock, Greg Weissert, and maybe they could even make another move, say, one of their outfielders they're looking to move here, either Jarren Duran or Wilyer Abreu possibly. Maybe you can get back some kind of a reliever in one of those trades. Maybe they have a bit of a luxury here where they could take advantage of his value. Now, as of right now, it's a median value of $2.2 million. Now, because of the market, the bidding can definitely increase there. So maybe the Red Sox can get themselves something pretty good for Chapman, just like the Royals did when they got Cole Reagans back when they traded him to the Rangers a couple of years ago. And two teams come to mind for Chapman. I think the Phillies make a lot of sense. Remember Jose Alvarado, he got suspended for a while for PEDs. It looks like they're looking for a consistent option. So you lost a hard-throwing lefty in Alvarado. Maybe you can add another one here in Chapman. I think it's a perfect fit. I could see the Tigers maybe. Now, when it comes to the overall numbers, they look pretty solid, but they could use more strikeouts in this bullpen as well. And you could have a very solid back end of the bullpen here. Now, with Chapman, a little while ago, I was thinking there's no way the Red Sox would trade this guy. But the more I think about it, the less I'll be surprised if it actually happens. For numbers 2 and 3, he's doing a 2-for-1 here with David Bednar and Dennis Santana from the Pirates. Now, the big thing he says here is the Pirates have made everyone, apart from Paul Skeens and Andrew McCutchen, available at this year's deadline. Bednar and Santana are all but gone, according to one GM, and could be packaged together. I find that very interesting. Now, David Bednar, remember, he got sent back down to the minor leagues a little while ago, but since coming back up, he's been great. You're going to get good strikeouts, good velo from David Bednar. And then someone like Dennis Santana, he's not going to get as many strikeouts as David Bednar, but he's going to give you some pretty solid stuff, good breaking stuff as well, having a very good year. ERA at a 1.46, FIP at a 2.49. Now, for David Bednar, I already mentioned the Phillies and the Tigers. And then with Dennis Santana, I got a few teams in mind here. I wonder if the Angels could maybe make a move here. With Dennis Santana, the big thing that he does well is he limits the walks. 1.7 walks per 9. The Angels are one of the worst teams when it comes to walks out of the bullpen. And you have a good couple of solid setup guys with Dennis Santana and Reed Detmers. I'm looking at the Yankees. They've had some bumps as of late with the back end of the bullpen, and they could use an improvement when it comes to the walks out of their bullpen as well. The Blue Jays, they've been walking a few guys as well. Their bullpen has been very good, but if they want to upgrade it even more, I could definitely see someone like Dennis Santana. But getting back to the Phillies and the Tigers, right? If you did want to get both of them in the same deal, why couldn't these teams both bolster their bullpen with both of these guys? At number 4, he has Felix Bautista. Now, he says here the Orioles claim they're not going to sell and instead will try to buy pitching. However, their best play might be to trade Bautista for multiple young starting pitching prospects to quickly reboot for the 2026 season. Now, for me personally, I don't see the Orioles trading Bautista. He still has a couple more years of control. They're looking to get back into contention next year, and he's one of the better closers in the game. He would definitely bring back a lot here for the Orioles, so I definitely see that argument. But with the Orioles, I see them going a different route. They got a lot of other guys they could look to move, like Zach Eflin, who we talked about earlier, Tomoyuki Sagano, who's not even on this list. I feel like he should be. You got someone like Sir Anthony Dominguez out of the bullpen. And then for position players, you got Ryan O'Hearn, Cedric Mullins. So they got a lot of other guys they could look to move to bring back value, and they could still hang on to Bautista. At number 5, he has Mason Miller. Now, he says here, one NL GM told me I think the A's would be foolish to hold on to him if they're not going to convert him into a starter, especially with the trade return they could get for him now. Now, with Mason Miller, continues to be one of the best bullpen arms in the game. ERA doesn't look great at a 4.55, but the FIP is a lot better. However, the command hasn't been the same as it was last year. He had 2.9 walks per 9 in 2024, and it's up to 4.5 this year, so that's something he's going to have to get cleaned up, but he's still striking out a lot of guys, still has great velo, great stuff. I just don't see the A's moving him. The A's need to bring in as much pitching as they can. I mean, that's a weak spot in their organization right now. I just don't see why you would trade Mason Miller, even if you don't put him into the rotation for 2026. Now, that is something to think about. Will the A's make him a starter? Well, who knows? Now, again, the A's need talented pitching within the organization, so I just don't see them moving Mason Miller, even if they keep him as the closer. Again, they need all the good arms they can get. At number 6, he is Ryan Helsley. Now he says here, how the team performs in July will determine if Helsley is dealt, according to one ALGM who has talked with the Cardinals. Now, with Helsley, the numbers are up from last year. ERA is up to a 3.41. FIP is at a 3.88. He has been having some issues giving up some home runs this year, but we all know the deal with Ryan Helsley. Good velo, good stuff. Now, I could see a scenario where the Cardinals move him and they can go with either guys like Phil Maton, Steven Matz. Now, not a high medium value as of right now, $3 million, but when you consider the market, teams willing to overpay to get some good bullpen help, I mean, there could definitely be a good market. Now, I am still 50-50 on whether or not he gets moved, but if the Cardinals are in contention at the deadline, I could still see a scenario where they look to move him, cash in on the value before he becomes a free agent, get some future pieces to help them over the next few years, and just go with someone like Phil Maton or Steven Matz at the closer role. At number 70 is Emmanuel Clase. Now he goes on to say, Clase's name kept coming up in the survey, which surprised me as he's considered one of the top closers in the game. He goes on to say down here, the Guardians need more offense. Perhaps they'd be willing to make a buyer-to-buyer type of trade to give up a lockdown leverage reliever for a middle-of-the-order impact bat to address this weakness. Now, with Clase, still one of the top closers in the game, ERA at a 3.13, FIP at a 2.45. Now, he's on a team-friendly deal, 5-year, $20 million, but he's only going to be getting more expensive here over the next few years. His contract is up after next year, but there are a couple of club options for 27 and 28. So I wonder if the Guardians would look to move him before he starts making more money. You got to remember, they are a small market team. They have one eye on the present, one eye on the future. So I wonder if they could make some kind of a trade where they bring back something for now as well as some value for the future. Now, maybe you could do something with the Red Sox. They got a surplus of outfielders with Jarren Duran, Willie Abreu, Cedar Rafaela, Roman Anthony, Masataka Yoshida's coming back soon to be the DH. So you got a lot of guys looking for playing time. Maybe they could look to unload one of those guys. Red Sox can bring back Clase. They can trade Chapman somewhere else, get back some value for him, but they would still have one of the top closers in the game. You know, maybe add on another couple of prospects here. And for the Red Sox, that could be a pretty solid deal. Maybe the Atlanta Braves. They've had some issues at the back end of the bullpen this year. Reza Iglesias has struggled, but maybe could do something here where Marcell Ozuna is going to be a free agent after this coming season, but that could give the Guardians a bat for the second half. Maybe send over a couple more pitching prospects like Didier Fuentes, Owen Murphy. Maybe something like this could happen with Clase. Now, getting back to the first sentence here, he says here, Clase's name kept coming up in the survey, which surprised me as he's considered one of the top closers in the game. Well, that doesn't surprise me really at all because the Guardians, they are a small market team. And wrapping up the relievers, he has a 2-for-1 with Yohan Duran and Griffin Jax from the Twins. He goes on to say here, the Twins are faltering, but I was surprised that both of these relievers were mentioned by executives. Wishful thinking by some contending teams? Well, I don't think so necessarily. I'm not surprised to see these guys coming up. Now, as of right now, 41 and 46, 4 back in the wild card race. Now, with the Twins, yeah, they definitely had talent coming into the year to be able to go on a run and try to win the division, but I wasn't very high with the durability of this team. That was a little suspect to me, with guys like Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton always being injury risks. Royce Lewis seems to get hurt all the time. Joe Ryan's had shoulder issues in the past, and here are the Twins now struggling, and Pablo Lopez, one of the most durable guys in Major League Baseball over the last few years, he goes down with an injury. So the Twins, they're in a pretty bad place right now. So I wonder if maybe they look to retool for the next few years here, because they do still have a lot of talent on this team. So I wonder if they could make some moves, to kind of just shake it up a little bit here. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Now, when it comes to the outfield, Byron Buxton, I don't think he's going to go anywhere. He's under a big contract. You got guys like Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach, they're okay bats. Harrison Bader's out there as well. So I just wonder if maybe they look to maximize the outfield. And I know they got a couple of outfield prospects like Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez. They're getting close. Someone like Luke Keeschel as well. They got Willie Castro in here as well. I actually wonder if he could be a trade candidate. Good utility player that could help out a lot of teams out there. But with the Twins, again, I wonder if they could shake some things up here. And that's where I'm looking at these two guys at the back end of the bullpen. Relievers at the end of the day, like they say, they're a dime a dozen. So maybe the Twins, they could find some other guys guys to fill those roles. This guy could definitely be a great addition for a lot of teams out there. This guy just throws gas. He's got good stuff, good numbers on the year, a couple more years of control. Griffin Jax, I think, is one of the most underrated arms in the game. Guy has 15 strikeouts per 9, under 2 walks per 9. One of these guys absolutely can bring back a good return, and that's where I look to the Red Sox again. I think about the surplus of outfielders here. Maybe someone like Jarren Duran could be a good guy for them over the next few years. And with the Twins, they could use a speedy guy like Jarren Duran. As of right now, they only rank 28th in speed score in all of Major League Baseball, so they could use a bit of a boost there. Like I said earlier with Aroldis Chapman, they could move him somewhere else, bring back some value, and then they would get a replacement closer just like that, get a couple of pitching prospects, whatever it may be. I'll bring up the Phillies again. I've mentioned them as a possible team that could use some bullpen help. Maybe could do something with Justin Crawford. That guy's got a ton of speed as well. Not fully Major League ready yet, but he's getting very close. Someone like Mick Abel, a young starting pitcher that could go into the Twins rotation over the next several years. Getting back to these guys again, I'm not surprised that they're coming up because, again, teams need relievers, and with the Twins, they could use a bit of a shakeup. All right, moving on to the position players, and he has Josh Naylor at number 1. He says here, Naylor was mentioned more than any other position player by executives in the poll. Now, again, with the Diamondbacks, who knows where they're going to be at the trade deadline. Josh Naylor would absolutely be an attractive piece out there. He's having a very good year, hitting .303, 358 on base, a .470 slugging, a 129 WRC+. You got to remember with Josh Naylor, there's not a ton of value because he is just going to be a rental. He is a first baseman, not a lot of positional value there. You're really just trading him for the bat. If you were looking at a trade with, say, the Red Sox, if the Diamondbacks were just going to be sellers, then you could probably get yourself a couple of decent prospects here. Someone like Yoferi Rodriguez, who as of right now is ranked number 11 in the Red Sox farm system. But let's say the Diamondbacks don't want to completely sell. Maybe they do more of a soft sell where they try to get something back for the now and the future. So an example would be maybe the Texas Rangers. I feel like they could use a bat. Maybe you could do something where you get a cost-controlled reliever in Jacob Webb to help out their bullpen, which has struggled this year, and you can get a pitching prospect on top of it, like Cole Drake, who's pitched very well in the minor leagues this year. Maybe something with the Mariners, right? Naylor would definitely help out the Mariners when it comes to first base production, which they have been weak in this year. Maybe you can send back Tyler Locklear, who hasn't really fully figured it out at the major league level, but he's hitting well in the minor leagues so far. Maybe you can get someone like a Brandon Garcia, a pretty solid pitching prospect in their system, and then maybe another reliever for the Diamondbacks bullpen. Edward Brizardo is having a decent year. Or maybe you could do something a little more funky here. Send back Nick Martinez and the rest of his contract to the Diamondbacks. He can help out their pitching staff for the rest of the year to try and help them get into the postseason, and attach a prospect, say Hector Rodriguez, who has a high upside bat. So I think there's different possibilities out there for Josh Naylor. At number 2, he is Ryan O'Hearn, and he says if the Orioles become sellers, O'Hearn could end up being the trade deadline headliner for Baltimore. Now, I've already talked about the Orioles. I absolutely think they need to be sellers. They have a lot of pieces they can trade away to get back future value that can even help them for next year as they try to regroup here. But I think Ryan O'Hearn absolutely needs to be at the front of the line. He's having a great year this year, having a career year. And I think the Astros make a lot of sense, especially if Yordan Alvarez ends up missing a lot of time. O'Hearn would be a good lefty bat to put in the middle of the order. He can play first base, left field, whatever it may be. I think he's a good fit. And I think the Astros would be a good trade partner with the Orioles because they do have some young pitching within the organization they could send back to Baltimore, which is what I think the Orioles need to help them over the next few years. Someone like Colton Gordon, he's in the Astros rotation right now, but they are going to be getting Spencer Arrighetti back soon, so maybe he could be expendable. Add another pitching prospect like Miguel Alola, and maybe you could have something here. You could turn to a team like the Rangers, who I've already talked about needing a bat. I mentioned Cole Drake earlier in another trade. Maybe you could send him back to the Orioles. You got Taedo in here as well, decent pitching prospect. I think O'Hearn needs to go somewhere that needs a bat and a team that can send back some young pitching. At number 3, he has Luis Robert. Now, he first points out that Robert just went on the IL with a hamstring injury, but then he goes on to say here, several execs don't think Robert will be traded at this year's deadline, instead believing that the White Sox will wait until the offseason. However, a few believe he'll get traded anyway because of the low supply of power bats and outfielders at the deadline, along with teams understanding what a change of scenery could mean for him. Now, like he pointed out, he's back on the IL. Unfortunately, he was healthy all the way up to this point, but but the nagging hamstring got the best of him. But it doesn't look like it's going to be anything serious. He is running right now and taking BPs. However, has been struggling with the bat, only hitting 185, a 63 WRC plus, 8 homers. The defense has looked very good out in center field, and he has stolen more than 20 bases this year. So there is value there with Robert. But I just wonder, will a team be willing to pull the trigger at this point? Now, a team could just trade for him and see how the rest of the season goes. If he ends up playing well, then they can just exercise the club option for 26. But I just wonder, with his contract right now, for the money that he's making this year, he is underwater at this point because he's not really putting up the best numbers, and he's making a decent amount of money, $15 million, so it's a little underwater. I wonder how far teams would be willing to go to try and get Luis Robert. I would imagine they would want the White Sox to maybe eat the rest of his salary for this year, but would the White Sox want to do that? I'm not so sure. I think this is going to come down to the philosophical thinking of an organization, whether or not they think they can turn Robert around. But at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up staying. At number 4, he has Eugenio Suarez. Back to the Diamondbacks, shall we? Now, again, it's going to come down to what the Diamondbacks want to do, but I think there's more of an argument to move Suarez, whether or not they're buyers, sellers, stand pat, soft sellers, soft buyers, whatever it may be, because they have one of the top prospects in the game, and Jordan Lawler, just waiting in the wings. He is injured right now, but he's going to be back soon. So I think you could move Suarez, get back some future value, and maybe even still try to compete in the second half. Now, I also agree here that the Yankees would be a perfect fit. As of right now, Jazz Chisholm's at third base, DJ LeMahieu's at second base, but DJ hasn't really been getting it done this year consistently. Jazz Chisholm and his range fit better at second base. I think Suarez and that power bat would make a ton of sense behind Judge, Bellinger, Stanton, and then Suarez with all the power he has. I think it's a perfect fit. And I think the Yankees should be able to get a deal done here. Maybe you could do something like this. Send back a higher-ranked pitching prospect like Brock Selvage is pitching well in the minor leagues right now, getting closer to the major leagues. And maybe you could send back a cost-controlled reliever like Ian Hamilton. With the Diamondbacks, they want to compete here over the next couple of years. So maybe you could get someone like him in return as well. Maybe you could throw in another prospect like Everson Pereira. He's got kind of lost in the shuffle over the last couple of years because he missed a lot of time due to injury, but he's having a decent year down in the minor leagues. He's got some upside in the bat there. Whatever it may be, the Yankees, they got a lot of prospects they could work with to get a deal like this done for a rental. At number 5, he's got Cedric Mullins. Now, he says here a trade sending Mullins and Batista to the Phillies could be a great fit for Philadelphia, which would have to give Baltimore a strong prospect package to make that hypothetical deal work. Now, I do wonder with Mullins if you would have to pair someone with him to maximize the return, because he has been slumping pretty hard over the last month, only hitting .214, on base under 300. A .417 slugging is okay, right around a league average WRC plus. But with Mullins, you got to remember he is a center fielder, which has a lot of value in itself. He is going to steal a lot of bases, so he does have some decent value with just that, and hopefully he can get the bat going. But if you were to put someone like Felix Batista with him, yeah, you could definitely get back a lot here. Again, though, I just think the Orioles would rather hang on to Batista at this point because they want to get back into contention next year. Unless maybe this offseason they went after a closer or just went with someone else that they already have at the closer role. Who knows? Never say never. If you were to do some kind of a deal like this, I would imagine Baltimore would want someone like Mick Abel back. No, you're not going to get Andrew Painter. He's one of the top pitching prospects in the game. I think someone like Mick Abel makes more sense here. But what would you put with Mick Abel? Would you do Justin Crawford? That definitely gets you closer. But would the Orioles want Justin Crawford? I'm not so sure about that. They already have a lot of outfield prospects. So now, if you were to do just Cedric Mullins, I'm looking at teams like the Mets and the Royals. I think they need to make an upgrade in the outfield. With the Mets, they got someone like Jonathan Santucci here, where he's doing pretty well in the minor leagues this year. I think the Orioles really need to get back pitching prospects in return. Maybe we can do someone like Nate Doman there as well. Now, if you went to the Royals, you could give someone like Ben Curtina, the number 4 prospect in their system right now. Maybe someone like Frank Mozzicato. Remember, he was a top 10 pick a few years ago, and he hasn't been really able to find his way. Maybe the Orioles can take him back instead. So something like this, I still feel like could work. But if they were to pair Felix Batista with him, they would definitely get a lot in return. At number 6, he is Jarren Duran. Now he says here, I was surprised by how many front office executives mentioned Duran. It makes me think the Red Sox may have decided Wilyer Abreu will play right field and Roman Anthony will play left going forward. He goes on to say down here, he's been linked with the Padres and the Phillies in trade talks. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm not surprised at all by how much Jarren Duran's been coming up in trade talks, even more so than Wilyer Abreu. Now, with Duran, MVP caliber numbers last year, very good season, but those numbers have regressed this year, only hitting .255, a .313 on base, a 97 WRC plus. Now, he'll still bring a lot to the table with his speed, leads the major leagues in triples right now, has a good amount of stolen bases as well, can cover a lot of ground out in the outfield, but I think the Red Sox probably see Wilyer Abreu as the better value moving forward. There is more power upside with him, and he plays a good defense out in right field with a good arm. He's going to be at a cheaper rate over the next few years, has an extra year of control over Jarren Duran, and with Duran and the speed, that tends to regress as they get older. I can see the Red Sox looking to cash in on the value of Jarren Duran while they can. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but the Red Sox got a lot of outfielders they're working with right now. I definitely think the Red Sox are going to move someone, and I am leaning more towards that it's going to be Jarren Duran. Now, some fits that I think would make a lot of sense. I'm looking at the Minnesota Twins. Now, they're not playing great baseball as of late, but I'm looking at this as a move for them over the next couple of years. As I mentioned this earlier, maybe they could move Aroldis Chapman somewhere else, get back some value for him, and maybe you can get back someone like Yohan Duran, and they can go with someone else as the closer there. Maybe Griffin Jacks. I don't know. The Padres, they were the first team reported to be interested in Jarren Duran. Now, with the Padres, they could use something out in left field. I mentioned earlier, Luis Robert could be a good fit out there. Well, Duran would definitely be a good fit out there with all the speed he has. Now, with the Padres, they do lack tradable assets or assets that they would be willing to trade. Now, Leo DeVries, I'm not sure they're going to give him up. He's one of the top prospects in all of baseball. Maybe they would be willing to give up Ethan Salas, young catching prospect, phenomenal defensively, but the bat still has some work to do. Red Sox have been good with position players in the past, so maybe he could be a future catcher down the road. Maybe a couple of other guys here, Cash Mayfield, pretty solid pitching prospect, and maybe Jason Adam, a guy that can put it in the bullpen now, help the Red Sox out in the second half. Now, maybe you could do the Braves. They've been connected with Jarren Duran a little bit. Now, what you could do is you could move Marcell Ozuna in a separate trade. That could open up DH. You could do a bit of a rotation there. Jerickson Profar, Ronald Acuna. But maybe they could send someone back like Grant Holmes, a couple of pitching prospects like Didier Fuentes, Owen Murphy. And one more team that I think would be a good fit would be the Mets. He would cover a lot of ground out there at Citi Field, whether or not that's left field, center field, and would give them one more bat in the lineup, a lineup that's been pretty up and down as of late. He would give them some speed as well. And what the Mets have that maybe the Red Sox would want is an everyday option at first base in Mark Vientos. Now, he has regressed this year, but a right-handed bat with some pop, maybe that could be a good fit at Fenway Park. Maybe the Red Sox can get him turned around. Someone like a Nolan McLean, he is a top 100 prospect as of right now, number 4 in their system. He's having a very good year in the minor leagues, is getting closer to Major League ready. I don't know if the Mets would want to give him up. Jack Wenninger, he is lower on their top 30 at number 27. If not him, maybe Nate Dome at number 18. I think the Mets would be a good fit, and I think they have the assets to get a deal done. At number 7, he's got Brian Reynolds. So he says here, Reynolds is under team control through 2031 at a salary of approximately $15 million per season, which should be considered market value. He goes on to say the Pirates are looking for younger bats in return. Now, this is where Jim seems to consistently have a misunderstanding when it comes to value. Now, sure, his salary per year seems pretty tidy, nothing too crazy, but you got to look at the numbers that he's putting up and the numbers that he's projected to have moving forward over the course of the contract. Now, again, he's on an 8-year contract that runs through 2030, club option for 2031. He's going to be 36 at the end of the deal, but if you look at the numbers right now, they're not very good. He has a negative F-WAR at negative 0.3. With Brian Reynolds, this is an underwater contract right now, so if the Pirates want to move him, they're going to have to pay some of it unless a team out there really wants to get Brian Reynolds. Now, the difference with Rafi Devers, he had an underwater contract when he went to the Giants, but that's Rafi Devers. He's one of the best bats in the game, putting up great numbers, but with Brian Reynolds, he's not putting up good numbers. So I don't see him getting moved. Now, I'd say for the Pirates, try to get Reynolds back on track and try to get bats in other ways. At number 8, he's got Taylor Ward. Now, he says here the Angels insist they're buyers, but come the deadline, I expect them to not make the same mistakes they've made in the past, as they should be sellers. If not, a buyer-to-buyer trade involving Ward would still make some sense, and he lists the Royals as a team that would make some sense. Now, with the Angels, they're right in the thick of things in the wild card hunt, only a few games back at this point, and if they take Ward out of the middle of their order, I mean, that offense is going to have a huge hole in it. I guess maybe you could put someone else out in left field when Christian Moore comes back off the IL, whatever it may be, but this would be a huge loss. Now, the only way I could see the Angels moving him is if maybe they got a good reliever back in return. Their bullpen hasn't been very good this year, so maybe you could do something with the Royals. Maybe Angel Zerpa could come back with an outfield prospect like Gavin Cross. Maybe you can go to the Padres. I mentioned earlier they need someone out in left field. Maybe you could do something like Jason Adam, who they would have for next year as well. Matt Waldron has fallen off this year. He's back down in the minor leagues, but that could be a cost-controlled starter. I'm going to be honest here. I expect Taylor Ward to stay with the Angels. At number 9, he's got Adolis Garcia. Now, he says here, if he doesn't pick it up in July and the Rangers don't start playing better, Texas could decide to move on from him. Now, with the Rangers, they're still only a few games out of a wild card spot, and Chris Young absolutely wants to compete, so I could actually see him trying to make an upgrade with the offense this year. They've had great pitching, but the offense has really struggled, including Adolis Garcia, only has an 81 WRC+. At number 10, he's got Wilyer Abreu. Now, he says here, Abreu is mentioned because some teams would prefer him over Duran in a trade due to his elite defense. He also has an additional year of control. Now, he's also leaving out the fact that he has more power upside over Duran, and with the additional year of control at a cheaper rate, that's why I think the Red Sox are going to want to keep him. But like I said earlier, I expect Duran to get moved instead of Abreu. I think the Red Sox see more value. At number 11, he's got Steven Kwan. Now, he says here, this shocked me, but multiple teams mention Kwan. He goes on to say perhaps the Guardians would consider dealing him for a more impactful power bat. Now, do I buy the fact that teams out there would love to have someone like Steven Kwan? Absolutely. But what I don't understand about this is him saying perhaps the Guardians would consider dealing him for a more impactful power bat. Now, I mentioned earlier the Guardians, they have been struggling with their offense, but Steven Kwan is the least of their issues right now. Just because he doesn't have power doesn't mean the Guardians would want to move him. Now, sure, he is getting closer to free agency a couple of years away, but I think the Guardians need to look into signing him long term. They would definitely get a lot for him. He has a lot of value because he's one of the best bats in the game. So I really don't see why the Guardians would want to deal him and how that would even make them better just because they would get someone that has more power. At number 12, he's got Luis Rengifo. Now, he says here he's one of the more sought-after Angels because of his positional flexibility and the way he plays the game. He goes on to say down here, there's been some buzz about Rengifo as a possible trade target for the Yankees. Now, sure, Rengifo does have versatility. He can play third, second, outfield, whatever it may be. But the problem is he hasn't been hitting this year. He doesn't swing and miss a lot, doesn't strike out a lot. So maybe a team out there could look to get him back on track. Problem is you're not really going to get a whole lot for him. So that's where I could see teams out there thinking, oh yeah, let's go get this guy. He's going to be cheap. But for the Angels, would they rather just keep him for this year because you're not really going to get much for him? At number 13, he's got Alex Bregman. Now, he says here, this is another shocking name to me, but some execs believe the Red Sox could move on from Bregman at the trade deadline if they can't extend him by then. He mentions here, Bregman and Scott Boras have told the Red Sox they're open to a long-term extension, but if the two sides can't work out a deal, don't be surprised if Boston trades him to either the Tigers or the Mariners at the trade deadline. Now, this is not Giraffe Neck Robbie talking, but I think this is complete nonsense. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think the Red Sox are going to do what they can to extend him, even if they don't get that done by the trade deadline. We saw this with Matt Chapman not too long ago with the San Francisco Giants. They worked out an extension towards the end of the year. I just don't see the Red Sox even thinking about moving Bregman. Now, with Bregman, after trading Rafi Devers, I think the Red Sox see him as the face of the franchise moving forward. He's provided good leadership in the clubhouse. He's been mentoring the young guys in there, and he was playing fantastic before his quad injury. So I think Bregman, he fits Fenway Park like a glove. And Craig Breslow even talked about this. He said here, what I'm very comfortable saying is Alex has been everything we could have asked for, both on the field field, but also in the clubhouse from a leadership standpoint. Now, with Rafi off the books in San Francisco now, the Red Sox have a lot more money to work with. I don't think Alex Bregman is going anywhere. And last but not least, at number 14, he's got Nick Castellanos. He says here, the Castellanos rumors just never go away, and for that reason alone, multiple GMs think there's a chance he could get moved if Philadelphia can find a better right field option. Now, with Castellanos, pretty solid numbers at the plate this year. The problem is that Castellanos is the worst defensive right fielder in all of Major League Baseball. He's pretty much a DH at this point, and he's making a lot of money, $20 million per year. So the production that he's giving you as a whole on the field, both offensively and defensively, is not matching up to what he's getting paid. So he's got an underwater contract. The Phillies would absolutely have to pay some of this down and or attach a prospect with him. So it's going to be really hard to move Castellanos. Now, maybe that could open up something for Jarren Duran. He can go out to left field. Max Kepler can go out to right. And all of a sudden, you got a better defensive outfield in Philadelphia. Maybe a team like the Texas Rangers, where they've struggled with the offense this year, you could put him at the DH spot. Hey, the Giants, they took on Rafi Devers' contract. Maybe they could take on a little bit more. Rafi can play first base, and then Castellanos can be the DH. Maybe the Angels, maybe they could do something there. Mike Trout can move back out to right field, maybe left field, whatever it may be. In the end, I have a hard time seeing the Phillies being able to move him unless they eat a lot of the contract. But everybody, that's the latest article from Jim Bowden. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you're kind of the way out, hit the like button for me, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.